mute my mic.
Okay, so we will start as we always do with a big deep breath. And the affirmation, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my strength and my redeemer. And this week we are starting on chapter 3, which is all about faith. Faith in the invisible substance, which is the key to demonstration. So when we create, and we've talked about this before, we create from divine mind, we receive ideas. Those ideas are in our minds. They become our ideas. And as we ideate and think about those things, and then we prove them out. So we create from those ideas that we get, but they have to be based in faith as the only foundation. It's the starting point to build anything. And since this class is about prosperity, it's the starting point to build a prosperity consciousness. Because as we've said before, you can amass wealth, but it will be very tenuous unless you have a prosperity consciousness. That is the only way that you are going to keep and realize the blessings and the abundance that you have is available at all times. And so when we have that foundation of faith, we can build that prosperity consciousness and we can create our world according to our specifications. So when you look at specs for anything, it says this, it's this high, it's this long, it weighs this much, it does all of this. Well, when we have faith and when we have a firm idea of what we want, then we have a set of specs or specifications for the life that we want to build and for the prosperity that we want to build and create for ourselves. So that begs the question, how do we put faith to work for us? Now, everybody knows that faith has been called the things of
evidence of things not seen.
Yes, assurance of things hoped for, and the conviction and evidence of things not seen. And Jesus said that he was going to build his church on faith. Okay, so how do you build a church on a conviction? How do you build what we think of as a building, a brick and mortar place built on this nebulous thing called faith? Well, that nebulous thing called faith is actually the consciousness in us that realizes that all of the individual substance all around us is part of us. And faith understands it's our ability to create from that substance. So when you look at it that way, and when you know that church is a consciousness, it's not a brick and mortar building. When Jesus said, I'm going to build my church on this, he's talking about, I'm going to build consciousness on faith. I am going to tune myself into this higher consciousness, my higher self, my communion with the divine, and that will be built on faith. So we take this aggregation of spiritual ideas into our consciousness, and then we have that foundation of faith that we can use to see what's unseen, to know what is available to us. And when we can see the unseen, and when we know what's available to us, then we can build our lives. We can manifest. Fillmore says that thoughts and ideas are eternal realities from which we build our lives and our world. So anything that wherever we start from, it's an idea, it's a thought, and we build on that. So what we hold in our minds becomes our reality. It becomes substantial. And it does that because of faith. And sometimes we have faith in the negative. So when we have faith in the negative, we're building what we don't want.
Would fear be considered faith in the negative?
Absolutely. So if you are focusing on that, if you're fixated on that, then what you're doing is using all of that mental activity, all of that power that you have to create something that you don't want. The job of faith is to take abstract ideas and to give them form. So do you want to take this abstract idea of the world's fallen apart and build that and actually see it, because it's going to prove itself out? Now we can be sitting right next to each other and I'm saying it's a beautiful day and you're only seeing what you're building in your mind. I'm seeing what I'm building in my mind. So I think I said last week, there are these two seemingly oppositional things can be occurring at the same time, because I'm building my world, you're building your world, and I might see your world as a beautiful thing and you think you don't know what you're talking about, or vice versa. So when we take that faith and when we build these positive ideas, and that's why it's so important to have an affirmation at your ready at all times, because we can get in that spiral of, oh my gosh, I'm so scared, I'm so worried, and this, and awfulizing. But when we can stop that, when we can stop it with a positive affirmation, then we can start to build on that. But you have to put the brakes on first, because you go down that path that you don't want to go down. And we're working with this formless thing that can't be grabbed a hold of, but it becomes substantive when we apply faith to it and when we work with it and use it. Fillmore talks about Elizabeth and Zacharias, the parents of John the Baptist. And as we know, they're old, they're never going to have kids. They're just kind of hanging out together. And then this angel shows up and says, hey, oh, by the way. And Elizabeth kind of believes that, but Zacharias doesn't, and it makes him mute. But Zacharias represents the perception, or what you can see, or what you know. We're old. Are you kidding me? This isn't going to happen. And Elizabeth represents reception. All right, I did. It's kind of Elizabeth's idea. I did. But when the soul qualities of perception, what you see and what you're willing to receive, get together, then they're open to those divine ideas, or those angels. An angel appeared. Angel is always a higher divine idea. It's always higher, coming from the higher consciousness. And when you're open to that, when perception and reception are married, they're joined together, they're open to it, then it opens the way for truth. And that opened the way for John to be born. And John is the first perception and the first, form of truth. He is the intellectual perception of truth. So John is the one that goes, repent, get ready. I've got this intellectual understanding of these concepts. And that's who John the Baptist is. He's got an intellectual understanding of the truth, and he goes about talking about it all the time.
Change your ways.
Change your ways, do it. But he's the precursor, and intellect is always the precursor for that fully realized Christ that's then represented by Jesus. So prepare you the way of the Lord. It was John's mantra that he went out saying. And he's talking about what the way of the Lord is, because I've got this understanding of it, but I haven't fully realized it. And he knows that he hasn't fully realized it. And he's telling everybody, get ready, because here it comes. So then Jesus comes about on the scene and he demonstrates the fully realized Christ self. So Fillmore reminds us that when we have a strong perception of something, when we've got that intellectual understanding of something and it feels good and it feels true, then we should act on it with expectation. Prepare you the way of the Lord. Get ready. Here it comes. I'm going to make smooth the path. And then the demonstration, the Christ consciousness, comes from that. It comes after that. That's how faith works, through the law of that creative word. So Jesus probably would have come anyway, but John had a huge following. I mean, John was dunking people in the water. There's this book that Rob gave me called shoot, I can't even think of that now, what the guy's name is, but it's a gospel. Oh, Biff. It's the gospel according to Biff, Christ's childhood friend. And he's talking about when John the Baptist was little and he's dunking all the kids and they're telling, let him up. But that's, that's what John had this huge following. People were coming from all around. And so he's saying, prepare the way of the Lord, and here it comes. And then, as you know, the two meet, and John says, I'm not even really qualified to take your sandals off. I mean, really, I've got an intellectual understanding of what's happening, and I know that you're the one that this is happening. And Jesus says, no, but you are too. This is all paraphrased. It's not really what was said.
Yeah.
This is a paraphrase of
You are
what
too, homie.
exactly. I mean, they had this, conversation, but I wasn't there. I didn't really hear the thing, but I am paraphrasing. But Jesus basically saying, yeah, you are too, but let's go ahead and get this done. So that's how faith works, is that we have this, yes.
I was thinking about the intellectual perception.
Mm-hmm.
We get that. We get John,
Mm-hmm.
and we're following him just like everybody else was.
Mm-hmm.
But that intellectual perception of it is not all.
No, you're not even halfway there yet. But you're on the right track.
Mhm.
But a lot of us, including my dad and me to some extent, get stuck in that intellectual. It's fun to be in there. It's for those of us who like that kind of thing. Yeah, for those of us who like it, it's comfortable. And I'm just going to keep studying. But the next step is application. And that's the one where we have to move forward with that.
Jesus.
Yep.
Going from student of truth to living the truth.
Right. From a student to living it. Absolutely.
Or
So-
from talking the talk to walking the walk.
There you go. There you go, homie. So then Jesus comes along and he starts performing these miracles. And when he's doing these things that we have termed miraculous, he's usually got with him Peter, James, and John. And if you like Jesus Christ Superstar as much as I do, there's a song, Peter, John, James. Those are the three that he has with him. And so often that Tim Rice wrote in Jesus Christ Superstar, will none of you wait with me, Peter, John, James. So it's those three, but they are faith, understanding, and love. Peter is faith, James is understanding, and John is love. And when we take those powers that we all have, and we consciously work with faith and with understanding and with love, then we can apply those things and perform those seeming miracles. Because what we do then is we're taking those divine ideas, we're using our power of understanding and our power of faith, and then love is just kind of a magnifier. Love just is it's kind of like setting paper on fire. You take the sun, you take the idea and you put the magnifier of love on it, and then you get a fire. So that just kind of jumpstarts everything. So when we have faith in things of the Spirit and we use that power of understanding to do our work in love, then we are acting from the Christ. Then we are empowering our divinity. Then we become Christ-like. And we have that guiding intelligence within that's available to us all the time. And all we have to do is take it and make it our own, because it is ours. But it just seems like it's just kind of out there, and we don't often grab a hold of it. But when we're in tune with that intelligence, we can understand that universal law of substance. We know how to apply it. We know how to take things from what Fillmore calls the ether and manifest it into the outer. And because God is principle and God is unchanging and God is love, we are given constantly that ability and that substance to use. And it's there all the time without ceasing. Our responsibility is to acknowledge it and to acknowledge God and to acknowledge that gift without reverting back to believing that our good comes from out there. My good comes from my paycheck. My good comes from my savings account. My good comes from how well the stock market's doing, because it's easy to fall back on that because we're bombarded with that every day. What's the Dow Jones today? Oh my gosh, when this election happens, if X gets elected, this is going to happen. And if Y gets elected, this is going to happen. And you hear it everywhere you turn. My boss came into our office today to say, how are things going? And we got off on how the Dow is better now than it's ever been. It's like, whatever. I don't follow all that. But the point of that is that it's everywhere. Our job is to go back and to realize that all good comes from God. It has nothing to do with recession, depression, Dow Jones, stock market, the S and I don't know.
Yes.
Yeah, that on all those other numbers. When we find that we are in that state, we have to repent, which just means change our minds. Turn around. Yeah, look a different way. Turn around and know that in divine mind, there is abundance. It's unfailing substance that is always there. When Jesus fed the 5,000, he understood the law. He took what he had, which was tangible, but he realized that that wasn't all that he had. He knew that there's no limit to the increasing power of the substance that's available to us, to Jesus, to everyone. And he took that and he manifested more. Now, whether you believe in that miracle or not, whether it was he fed 10,000 or 5,000, or there were women, the women weren't counted and the children didn't count, and whatever you want to do, whatever the Bible scholars say, if we believe this spiritual truth, whether Jesus did that in fact, we have to believe, if we believe the spiritual truth, we have to believe that he could have done it even if he didn't. If we believe that whether Peter went out and grabbed a fish and took a coin out of its mouth or not, we have to know that those things can and did happen because Jesus understood this law. I got off and now I got to get back to it. There wasn't anything about a coin and a fish in here. It's not a miracle because it's something that we all have. It's just unawakened within us. That power is available to all of us. So if we're looking at the story as it's written, when he fed the multitudes, he entered into the silence. He prayed, and then he blessed what he had at hand. So he paused, he centered himself, and he affirmed what he knew to be true. And if we want to increase our prosperity, our health, our serenity, our peace, whatever it is that we want in our lives for ourselves, then we have to get still. We have to realize that our source is spirit, and that anything that we need, any needed resource, is here in its fullness. Pardon me, because spirit is here in its fullness. God is here in its fullness. God is good. God is substance. God is all there is. So that it just follows that everything that you could need is here, right now. As much as it's ever been, as much as it was 2,000 years ago, or 5,000 years ago, or 10 minutes ago. It's the same now and forever. world without end. Amen. It's,
Living in
It's-
it now.
that's exactly right. And the Catholics say that every time they go to mass. And very few, if any of them, know what they're saying. Because that's exactly right. As it was then, it is now, and it's gonna be later. But we forget that and we say, yeah, but there's a lot of yeah, buts. But when we make contact with that truth, with that spiritual truth, and we make contact with faith, then we find all that we need welling up inside of us. And Fillmore says, if we let it ooze away without understanding it, we don't get any benefit from it. Because it's there and it's bubbling up, but we're not recognizing it and we're not making use of it. And so therefore we get no benefit. The key is to speak the words of abundance with power and authority. I am abundant. I am prosperity. I am serene. Whatever your I am that you want to identify as already is, but you got to speak the words of truth and recognize it. So when we tune into the news, then we develop that fear of lack because that's what they're selling. We develop that fear of violence because that's what they're selling. Don't live in Memphis. You'll get killed in Memphis. And we develop that fear of the loss of control because the control is always out there. So if it's out there, I don't have any. But when we know spiritual law, we don't buy into those fear-based thoughts. Because anytime anybody tells me, oh, Memphis is scary, I talk to people all over the state. We have people that are as close as Jackson, Tennessee, that won't come to meetings in Memphis because it's so scary. I say, I could go to Memphis, any part of Memphis, day or night, and I'm not scared. But that's what they've bought into. They've heard on the news how horrible it is. They've heard on the news how terrible it is. And that's what they're buying.
I've said this a lot to a lot of people. I read a book many years ago and it changed my life, and every once in a while I'll go back and reread it. It's called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But the premise is people are afraid because of one thing, is that no matter what happens, they're afraid they won't be able to handle it. So that's where the fear is. If I get shot, I can't handle it. If this person dies, I can't handle it. If I get diagnosed with this, I won't be able to handle it. So all the fear comes down to, if it happens, I can't handle it.
Right.
And I don't know if I buy into that 100%, but it makes a lot of sense to me. And I think about that often. So yeah, I can handle it. Whatever it is, I may not like it, but I can
Right.
handle it.
And it'll change.
Yeah.
And it will change. And when we don't buy into those fear-based thoughts, when we realize that we have to bless every single thing in order for us to increase and for our good to multiply, then we can turn away from that. We can repent from that. We can not look at that. And if it takes not reading the newspaper or not listening to the news or whatever it takes, then fast from those things for a while. Even if you feel like you really need to be in the know, just take a little fast.
I've recently done that because I got so keyed up one night, I couldn't sleep. I was just anxious and
Uh-huh.
panicky, and so I couldn't fast very long though, because I want to be in the know.
Well,
But there
and
are other things happening in the world too, that, I need to be able to lift up and know.
and in this part at this point in your life right now, you feel like you need to do that, and that's fine. But go ye apart for a while. When the crowds got too much for Jesus, he got in the boat and went to the other side and just took a little minute. And if it's good enough for him, I guess it's good enough for us.
Well, I've had to learn to do that these
Yeah.
last couple of weeks.
But the words that Jesus spoke when he blessed the the fishes and the loaves are the same words that we have. They're the exact same words and they have the exact same power. And they're charged with the same spiritual life force. No difference. But when we hold a fear of lack and we talk about how limited our finances are, we are just asking for a decrease. You're right. You know, you're right. Your finances are limited because you're stepping on the hose. But when we recognize our bounty and when we give thanks for what we have, then we're opening the hose. We're opening that path for increase. And I think I made this up. I don't know. I think I did, but I thought, now I may have heard it somewhere, but I think I made it up. Appreciation, giving thanks, brings appreciation, a rise in value.
I think you made it up. I've never heard it before.
Thank you. I'm pretty sure I made that up. What were you going to say?
I was just, we were talking about the hose and everything. I was thinking about how, Butterworth had, talked about, the flow, keeping the flow going, and all you have to do is flip the switch. But sometimes we use a dimmer switch. Instead of letting it illuminate completely, we dull it down, and it's like, well, I do have these gifts. I do have an abundance of ideas and opportunities and things, but yeah, I might mess them up. So maybe I should just do it with a roll instead of. So we put our own dimmer switch on there, but the flow is there.
Absolutely.
Good point.
Yeah, it's very hard to completely shut off the flow because we live, move, and have our being in this soup of divine mind. So it'd be very hard to completely shut off the flow, but we do dim it down. And you know, that rheostat goes way down sometimes. And as we were talking before we started tonight, sometimes that power is a little bit scary. It's a little bit scary to realize how much power we actually have at our fingertips.
With much power comes with great power comes great responsibility.
Absolutely. And the responsibility is only to ourselves. And yet it's still a very great responsibility of staying in that mindset. But that power of the word that I talked about, it's in all of us. Pardon me. And the apostles realized it when during Pentecost, when they were in the upper room and the Holy Spirit was breathed on them. Now, when you're talking about the upper room, you're talking about the crown of the head. You're talking about the place where ideas come. You're talking about that place where we ideate, where we create, where we form those ideas that we can then manifest. So it becomes even more amazing or awesome the way that this is. So when you look at that story, you say, okay, they were in the upper room and then the Holy Spirit was breathed on them. And so what they're realizing there in their brains, in their upper room, in their consciousness is this power that they have. And that we have. We just don't, nobody breathes on us. I think that's fallen out of favor.
No,
Everybody's got a mask on. Nobody wants to breathe on anybody else. But when we get into that spiritual consciousness, when we realize that's what we have, then we, like the apostles after this happened to them, can speak the word with authority and power and open new avenues of good, because that's what they did. You know, then they were supposed to go out and preach the gospel to all of the nations, which means all of the rest of our being. So you've got the idea here. Tell the rest of your thoughts how to act. Because the rest of our thoughts often act poorly. So when you're going out and preaching the rest of the gospels to all of the nations, they're not asking you to go to Africa and tell those little children that they're going to go to hell if they don't have Jesus Christ as their personal savior. It's saying, go into your body temple, go into yourself and preach that gospel tell every bit of yourself the power that you have and demonstrate it. To bring about these undeveloped spiritual qualities that we all have into fruition, we have to believe in them. So as I said earlier, just a little preview, the father of the epileptic boy said to Jesus, Lord, I believe, help my unbelief. And Fillmore puts it like this, Lord, keep us from unbelief, from leaning on the things that we see, from judging according to appearances. Because that's where our unbelief comes from. We start relying on the senses to say, oh, yeah, I don't have quite enough money to buy that truck that I want to buy because I'm looking at my bank account. Oh,
Or
yeah.
not even our senses, but what we're being fed.
Yeah, a lot of times. Absolutely.
Relying on other people's negative perceptions is people eat it like manna. I mean, that's their food.
Mhm.
And if you just listen to yourself might have some negative or untrue things that are going on that you're going to have to talk down. But if you're listening to that other shit, you don't have much of a chance.
No, not if you're buying it. If you're eating it
No.
up with a spoon, you don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're on a Facebook group all the time that's talking about how terrible everything is, and you're into that, like some people that I know that just can't not see every post that comes through, then you get what you get, and don't throw a fit because you asked for it.
Yeah.
But yeah,
And the media.
yeah, absolutely. And then the next thing that he says is he's talking about how wonderful our imaginations are, and they are. The power of imagination is a wonderful thing, and we can conjure up made up things that seem real to us. And if we use that power with faith, then the things that we conjure up will be just as real as the things that God creates. They're going to be substantial. But that's why we always have to guard what we think about, because we can also conjure up things that are unreal, untrue with a capital T, but sure do seem real to those senses. You know, we can project things out into our world, into what we're aware of that we don't want. So if we stay on guard and try to have those highest and best thoughts at all times, then what we're creating at all times are things that we do want. When we have faith in things of the outer, then we're building shadows without substance. And that's why I said we create things that seem like that. So, but they're simply shadows because we know that everything is good. It's all good. And God is all good. But we can certainly get into a place that it feels like nothing's good. And those are shadows without substance. We can also create what appears to be abundance or wealth, and that too would be a shadow without substance, because then we're so worried about it getting taken away from us, or it does get taken away from us, that we can't enjoy that. It's a shadow without substance.
And my aunt's brother, when his wife's father died, they got a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
And he's retired now, and he took his retirement early, and now he's worried that they're not gonna have enough money, even though they still have all of this money. And he's worried that that money's gonna run out. So, he can't do this and they can't do that. And it's like, you have it, but now you're worried you're gonna lose it.
Exactly. And Fillmore says these things pass away and leave us with nothing, because that is prosperity or wealth that's not based on true prosperity, on prosperity mindedness, because he could have little and feel like he was as rich as a king. That's prosperity. That's living the truth. But it doesn't matter how much money you have if you're afraid it's going to leave, you got nothing.
Or he could go back to work and save the money.
Yeah.
That's just worrying to be worrying.
If we want true prosperity, we have to forget about things, money, bank account, houses, cars, and have faith in God. Have faith in nothing less than the one mind from which all substance comes. And then you have true prosperity because you know that you have everything that you need. Because mind and ideas of mind never end. And when we build our wealth, our prosperity, our abundance with divine substance and cultivate faith, then we've laid up our treasure in heaven. That's what Jesus says, lay up your treasure in heaven. Well, then you have, because you've got something that is substantial. So getting back to faith,
You have faith, like Peter didn't start walking on the water, then he started, well, wait a second.
exactly.
Like, wait,
Peter is to study Peter from the idea of faith. If you read all of the stories about Peter and insert the word faith every time, it's really, really interesting because you see things like faith walks on water, but then looks away from the Christ, looks away from the internal I am, looks away from the power that it has, and it begins to sink. But when the power reaches out to faith and faith accepts that hand, it rises up again. It's very interesting. Go back through and read and just kind of replace Peter with faith every time. It's phenomenal. So faith is what makes ideas real. And when we or anybody else has faith in what we're doing or what we're making or what we're selling, then it's seen as real and it's seen as worthwhile. And that's why a lot of salesmen are very successful because they see what they have or what they're selling as worthwhile, and they have bought into it completely. And when they do that, then it makes it real and other people buy it as well. When we can do that, when we can have faith in what we're doing or what we're making or what we're selling or what we're thinking about, then success and prosperity are certain. It can't not happen. And Fillmore suggests that we use this affirmation to help us with that. I have faith in the substance of God working in and through me to increase and bring about abundance, and bring abundance into my world. I have faith in the substance of God working in and through me to increase and bring abundance into my world. And whatever we put into substance along with faith is going to manifest for us. He repeats that over and over. It's in this chapter, that is his salient point. Whatever you put into substance along with faith will be manifest in the outer. And when we look back through the Bible and know Peter, of course, is faith, but there are other characters that show us how to use faith in our everyday affairs. The story of Jacob and Isaac, that was complete faith in God. Jenny just went like this. Oh, I got the story. All right, yeah, that's stabbing your son. But that is another example of faith. David and Goliath. David's faith in his ability to use a slingshot. Those are all characters that, of course, represent us. And those are all ways that we can use our faith. And that's how that through their demonstration and use it in everyday affairs. The David and Goliath story is one that's told time and time again in books and movies. You know, it's the little guy beating the big guy, but that's That's all about faith. And we are going to demonstrate prosperity when we understand the law and we apply it faithfully. Again, he repeats it here. Same thing, said a different way. He says it about 82 different ways in here. Right now, right this moment, we're in the presence of creative mind. We can't not be. And it's working right now as it always has been. No more, no less, no different than when those people were writing the Bible. No different when Jesus was performing miracles. And if we realize that fact, then we increase the activity of our mind and tune into divine mind. Because we know that we are in that creative mind. And if we are in that creative mind, then we are part of that creative mind. And when we can realize that fully and join with it, then we increase the activity of our minds. We are always handling, molding, creating with that universal substance. It's like Play-Doh. Actually, it's more like model magic. Even if we don't know it, even if we don't realize it. But when we know it and when we use it rightly, then we can give form to our thoughts in a positive, powerful way. Because then we are aware of what we're doing. I mean, I stumble around in the dark a lot. But when I think about it and when I'm in tune, I realize that I'm no longer stumbling around in the dark, that I truly am co-creating.
And it happens like that.
And it happens instantaneously.
Think rightly.
And then we turn around and say something like, oh, money's tight, or I'm afraid I don't have enough. And then we're putting a limit on that substance that's flowing to us. And again, it happens like that. You just turn around and go, oh yeah, but I don't really want to spend that much on this because I'm afraid I'm not going to make it to the end of the month. You know, my money's not going to make it to the end of the month. But if we want more supply, if we want a larger supply, it can only come to us through mind. And there really is no larger or smaller supply. It's just supply. It's there. But it's that stepping on the hose or turning the rheostat, the dimmer switch. Do we want it to be bright in here, or do we want to just grope around in the dark?
I just want to see just enough. We don't stub our toes.
Exactly. Because when we think about it, when we really get down to it, we realize that there's no such thing as an absence of anything. There's no lack. The only lack is the fear of lack. It's like there's nothing to fear but fear itself. There's nothing to lack but fear of lack. And so what we have to overcome, as you said earlier, is fear. And that fear is something we're not going to be in control. Fear is what causes us to speculate and get this great group of amass all these tangible symbols. This is mine and this is mine. I don't need anything but this pen and this remote control and this chair and this lamp. But that's what we do. That's why we buy toilet paper. There's dock workers. They're gonna go strike probably again in January. I mean, we've already heard that. Run out and buy toilet paper. Doesn't matter that they don't handle the toilet paper. We've got to have toilet paper because there may be a lack of toilet paper. It's made right here. Kimberly-Clark. There it is, right over there. But we run out and buy it. I went to Costco the day after and people were coming out with, everybody that I saw coming out had paper towels. And I thought, they have a sale on paper towels? No, they were already out of toilet paper, so people were buying paper towels. Everybody that came out of the store had paper towels. And there was not a sale on paper towels. Their faith was way misplaced. And then guess what? Finally, the media caught up and said, we're not really going to run out of toilet paper? I mean, we have now because y'all bought it all. But that system of collecting stuff fails every single time. Every time. But when we understand that all we need is what's required for today's use and the promise that tomorrow's needs are going to be met, then we're rich. I got enough toilet paper for today, and I will have enough for tomorrow.
Just like the manna in the desert,
Exactly.
had enough for the day.
And you couldn't save it.
And I'll step my butt in the bathtub and rinse off if I don't have toilet paper.
There are
Exactly.
ways.
There are other ways.
Toilet paper has not existed.
And there's no assurance in that hoarding. People who hoard are not happy. And you see people that their houses are just full of stuff. And I know that's a mental illness, but even on a smaller scale, I've got all of this stuff. Your uncle, he's got all that money. He's hoarding this money for fear that it's going to go away. So now he's got it all. And time and time again, we learn that lesson. Well, we don't learn that lesson. We're taught that lesson, but we never do learn it as a people. Now, some of us have kind of got it. It's like, okay, I've got this. But then even, when they started buying up all the toilet paper, I thought, we're not going to have a toilet paper shortage, but now we do because everybody bought toilet paper. And what if I need some? So then I got involved in it. But I just talked myself down. Don't worry, I talked myself off that ledge. So the affirmation that I use at the beginning of every class, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my strength and my redeemer, is a statement of truth. It is an affirmation saying that the words and the thoughts that I have are always molding that spiritual substance. They're always bringing into manifestation whatever it is that I'm talking and thinking about. And those creations are acceptable and recognized by the divine only if they're true, lovely, and altogether good. So the meditations of my heart and the words that I say are acceptable because they're only recognized by the divine if they are acceptable. The ones that I have to worry about are what I'm saying that I'm hearing. So that affirmation is saying to me, let what I say meet this criteria. Let what I think meet this criteria. Remind myself to say the things and think the things that meet the criteria of being acceptable to the divine, that are acceptable to the divine. So we plant those ideas, this as we're molding the substance, we're planting it into the substance of what Jesus called the kingdom of the heavens, and Moses called it the Garden of Eden, and Fillmore calls it the ether. So we're taking these things and figuratively taking the substance and planting it back into that ether, that Garden of Eden, that kingdom of heaven, that will allow it to grow into fruition, into manifestation. And if our seed ideas are faith-based and they're focused on abundance, then there is no way that they can't not produce. Well, I love a good double negative. They can't not produce. They have to. If we take those seed ideas and we plant it in that fertile soil of faith and imagination, then what comes up is that good abundance that we've planted. And Fillmore says that we should start each day with an affirmation. And he suggests a couple. One is, I set God before me this day to guide and guard, to protect and prosper me. Or, the Spirit of the Lord goes before me this day and makes my way successful and prosperous. Or, I set the Spirit of the Lord before me this day to guide, govern, and direct me, making easy and successful my way. Those are all Fillmorean affirmations that have been, manipulated from these two. And if we decree it to be so, it will.
It'll change your thinking. If you're worried, if you're afraid, if you're concerned, if you're cranky, if you're mean, it'll just change you.
Cranky and mean. I never get cranky. No. So when we find thoughts of lack or limitation sneaking into our consciousness, as mine is wont to do, he says to evict them immediately and just have an affirmation right ready, get to kick it out. Your stuff is on the curb. All your mattress, your bedding, all of your stuff is on the curb, because he says things like, I am always provided for because I have faith in omnipresent substance. So instead of, oh, I don't know if I'll be able to make this payment, I'm always provided for because I have faith in omnipresent substance. Or, I trust the universal spirit of prosperity in all my affairs, and I recognize my almighty resources. And even though supply might seem to come from outer channels, it's really coming from that truth that we're holding on to inside. And those affirmations just keep us in line with that. Keep the dimmer switch turned on more fully. Keep our foot off the hose. However you want to say, keep us in that divine flow. So have a pocket full of them, whatever resonates.
And if we believe and live these ideas and trust that this is what's happening and going on, then we will naturally be motivated to do the footwork to make it become a reality.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because then we're open to ideas. So we may have an idea that says, try this. And then you try it and here comes more of your good. I think you're having some spiritual prompting right now about what you're doing with your job and all of that. And, as long as you're open to that divine prod, that guidance, you're going to be taken care of.
Here's a good one. Peace fills my heart and mind. I know that God is present in all persons and situations, and I trust Him to establish that which is right, good, and orderly.
You need to write that down for me.
I'll do it.
And
She uses-
angels are spiritual ideas.
That's
right?
correct. Mhm. So some questions from chapter 3. What is the starting point in building a prosperity consciousness? Hint, title of the chapter. Faith. Absolutely. It's innate in all of us. And we need to ask the question of how we put it to work in our affairs. And we do that by starting with the one mind. Because we are image and likeness beings, we're just like God. I mean, just like Him, almost twins. And we base our creations on faith, just like God did during the whole creative 6 whole days. It was
Continue.
absolutely. So what is the relationship between faith and substance?
With the faith that the ideas are going to be able to take the substance and make it a reality.
It is, yeah, it's the underlying basic principle of manifestation. Pardon me, he says that faith represents substance, which is an interesting way to say it. I wouldn't exactly have put it that way, but when you think about it, it does. But faith is that base. I'm going to build my church on faith. I'm going to build my consciousness on faith. And when my consciousness is built on this foundation of faith, I have that substance. I can manifest that substance. I can manipulate it and work with it and mold it into what I want to create in my life.
Place to stay.
So how can you have faith? It's not tangible. How do you grab hold of faith? And we know that it's things not seen and assurance of things not yet manifest. What were you going to say?
I was just thinking about the verse, I think Paul wrote it, for by grace you've been saved through faith, and that is not of yourselves, it is the gift of God. So is it that the faith that we do have, I guess we develop it as part of divine mind?
Absolutely.
I don't know. Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly right. He said,
The faith is not of yourself, it is the gift of God. So if we're having this faith, but how does that play into it is a gift of God?
so it's not of the
Everything.
ego. Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, that's true.
Yeah, it's not of the ego, it's of our divinity. Our divinity is of God. And the difference between John the Baptist and Jesus?
John was the intellect and Jesus is the application.
Very good. And the intellect always grasps the truth first. So we need the intellect. We have to have that John piece to get a hold of it, and then to apply it is the Jesus part. And how do love and understanding assist faith in its accomplishments? Now we're talking about Peter, John, and James.
That's the question.
How do love and understanding help faith to accomplish what we want it to? So remember I talked about a magnifying glass?
It takes off.
It does. And love magnifies faith, it makes it bigger. And you have to have understanding of what you want. So you can have all the faith in the world, but if you don't understand how you want to apply it, you're not going to move forward with that application.
And if you don't love it, you won't know it too.
That's right. This is a good one. Are difficult experiences necessary in life? And why do we have them? As you said something about that the other day, we were talking about politics, and you said, well, we haven't had a tragedy in a long time. And I said, I don't think you have to have them. And I don't think that difficult experiences are necessary. We often have difficult experiences because we remove ourselves from our I am, from our knowing, from our spiritual truths, because we're trusting our senses.
We can only do it.
So if we're trusting our senses, then we are going to have difficult experiences. In fact, our senses are there to help us. I mean, if you touched a hot stove and it didn't burn your hand, then your whole body would burn up and you'd be gone. But we have that ability to, ow, that was a difficult experience. Ow, that hurt. I've taken my hand away. So sense consciousness, we do experience those things. They're not necessary. If we could intuit all of that stuff, or if we were always in the flow, we probably wouldn't touch the hot stove. We would already know that, there are things that would prevent us from that. But because we stumble around in the world, counting on these senses that we have, there are times that we have difficult experiences. They're not necessary, but they do occur. Does that make sense about the difference in necessary and does occur? And we have them because we think poorly. We have what the AA groups call stinking thinking. We get in our heads and project things that aren't true. You know, think, okay, if this happens and then this is gonna happen, and we're going down that road of all of this really terrible thinking. Instead of bringing it back, realizing who we are and what we are, and then we're at peace. And if we're at peace, we're not having difficult experiences. And then finally, how does fear produce stagnation in financial circulation? And how does confidence or faith restore normal conditions? So I think we talked about that a lot tonight, about the rheostat, when I, turning down, dimming the light. So when we allow, we're really kind of led around by the nose, by the media, by race mind, by what our senses tell us. It's like, and when we do that, we step on the water hose. We turned out, we're not open to our good. Our good's still coming to us, trying to come to us, but we're not open to it. So as we're shoving that away by looking over here, we have to repent and look back towards the good so that we can receive it. And when we have faith, then we have repented, then we have turned back and realized what's going on. So any questions about anything tonight? Anyone? All right, then I shall bless you. Wait.
Bless me.
Oh, yeah, bless Penny. Penny and Art are not here tonight because Penny is ill. So we want to see her as healthy, whole, and know that she is, her cells and her body is re-knitting as we speak. And I shall bless you from Mark 11:22-24, when Jesus answered them, have faith in God. Truly, I tell you, if you say to this mountain, be taken up and thrown into the sea, and if you do not doubt in your heart, but believe that what you say will come to pass, it will be done for you. So I tell you, whatever you ask for in prayer, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours. Thought that was a good one for faith. I love you all. Good night, and thank you for coming.
Good night. Love you back.
I just want to see that what the mountain is. That never went